Welcome to another weekend here on the platform. My name is Sam Omashe. On the program this week, I'll be speaking with Prince Julius Adelusi-Adeluyi, National President of the Nigerian Academy of Pharmacy and legal practitioner who turns 80 this week. But before the big talk segment, my column will be read to you now.
Funtua, the glorious contradiction. He drove himself on his fatal hour. His chest was choking him, and he called his doctor. His heart condition did not deter him from sitting behind the wheels, as was his wont. His driver was beside him. That hour emblematized the man, Ismaila, Funtua, who passed on in the hospital. He took his last breath after his last drive. He was tall, looked ascetic, and spoke as from a throne. But he allowed himself to drive, and at prayer, he invited the big and small. He had money and was willing to share. Each time we spoke on phone, he would say, "Ekonko, how is Lagos?" He had strong views, but he was ready for intellectual battle, as in the case of my argument with him over Showore. I didn't agree with him, but later I was pleased that his position softened. He mocked the idea of being called a cabal. Never to deny anything, he discussed it with me, and he told me about his apprenticeship into that vortex of power. He spoke about how he was the scribe. They held meetings in secret, he said. He was like a little boy in the group of the shadowy men of power in the north in those days. They went alone. Not even the drivers were permitted to accompany them to the place. They ate together and played games like Ludo and held meetings late into the night and even into the mornings. It was my longest conversation with him over the phone. He spoke with the same gusto about his fight for June 12 and how he dared Abacha and the Northern Power Bloc that resisted Abiola's mandate. He was Abiola's deputy as chairman of Newspapers Proprietors Association of Nigeria. He was a contradiction as a patrician who fought for the commoner, a prince and a pauper. He was free with other ethnic groups. He told me Sam Amuka was his best friend and called him my brother from another mother. Amuka, tongue-in-cheek, retorted by asking whether I knew of an Ishekiri man who bore Funtua's name. It is often a potent statement to see him walk beside Amuka, his head in the sky, Amuka not far beneath his shoulder. I saw him smile in a phone dialogue with Amuka and looked like a little boy. He was a good prince, sometimes misunderstood, but his heart was in the right place. He's a perfect example of the patrician who embraced the commoner.
Now, you finished from university, you became a practicing pharmacist, and so on. How did you do the transition from being a worker? You worked with Pfizer and a few others, and then you started up your company, the first indigenous company to be quoted on the stock exchange, if I'm right. How did you pull that off? What were the challenges?
I came back from all these students running around the world with tremendous contacts. I remember the Sunday Times writing something about my so-called peregrinations in 1967. People had some interest in me, but I had already secured this job. I was headhunted to take the job as the assistant general manager in a big company called Pfizer. Good idea, good experience, but I knew that I wasn't going to be in an employed situation for too long. So I thought I'll start my own pharmacy. I had always wanted to make a change in the practice of the profession. And you don't just talk about it, you make it happen. So I started Julie Pharmacy. Uh, I went to the retail end because I knew that it was important to let the community around you know that pharmaceutical service is distinct. So we started it. We're going to be 50 next year in existence, and everything went well. Well, give or take all the ups and downs. You know, business in Nigeria is like licking honey from a thorn.
Hmm.
You enjoy the honey, but the thorn is always there. So with Julie Pharmacy, it has been a thorny, horny kind of presentation. But if you know what you want to do, you stick to it. And that's why we are there. We would say that Julie then became respected, obvious. We had 22 branches when we went to the stock exchange. Why did I go to the stock exchange? Again, if you had the kind of background I had, you tend to say, why are the black people not on the stock exchange? Black companies. Especially when at that time also I was chairman of the indigenous business group of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce. And, and we got the stock exchange people to come and talk to us. At the end of which, well, they invited some 34 of us to apply. There were no rules, no regulations. So we all applied from the formal and informal sector, from those who are members of the chamber or those who are not. Somehow, somewhere, I got to be the one that they would put on the stock exchange in a kind of guinea piggish way.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a lot of noise made about some kind of achievement of the stock exchange having an indigenous business on board. A few other people joined after, but I can tell you that the experience in the stock exchange has been rather challenging.
Mm.
I always want to address situations where people say it cannot be done.
Mm.
It's the Nigerian factor, all those kind of lazy cliches. You want something to improve, set about it yourself and be the change that you want to be. That's how I got to the stock exchange. And since then, it's been a roller coaster ride. But the grace of God resides with us.
There are lots of people who still die. There are lots of pharmaceutical companies that are supposed to be licensed, and they still have some of them, quite a few of them have bad drugs. In fact, somebody told me once that, and he doesn't live in Lagos or Abuja, he said he only relied on coming to Lagos or Abuja to get good drugs, and that they discovered that when he was a commissioner in one of the states, that they discovered that a lot of the drugs, a lot of the problems they had with health was taking care of people who were actually victims of bad drugs.
Yeah, and faking of drugs
Yes.
has become so bad that if the doctor has to say a prayer and say that this prescription I'm writing, may it be filled with the correct drugs. Fake drugs are so fundamentally challenging that the government at the three tiers must take it more seriously than it is being taken now. Pharmacists themselves, they have a pharmacist registration council, right? And that particular council body is supposed to be registering all outlets, and NAFDAC has its own role to approve drugs and similar items that will be sold in the Nigerian space. But it's not enough to say these are the mandates. It is much more important to give them backup by way of manpower, by way of logistics, by way of motivation, so that they, as institutions, can in fact enforce the regulations. You'll be surprised how short-staffed NAFDAC is, not to talk of the Pharmacist Registration Council of Nigeria and similar bodies. But I think that the leaders of the profession are renewed in their determination to make sure that the faking of drugs or the importation and distribution and sale of fake drugs reduce. I know this because I'm part of the army, quote and unquote, interested in this, not only for pharmacists, but for the generality of Nigerians.
Well, you were also a minister of health just for a short while, and I'm sure you had all of that coming on at that time. Was not as bad today as it was bad when you were minister. But then we'll not dwell too long on that. I want you to address that and also address the fact that you have been involved also in a lot of humanitarian activities as the first district governor of Rotary Club.
Okay. The Minister of Health thing is also the grace of God. And I still say that more pharmacists should be given the opportunity. How come I'm the first pharmacist to become the Minister of Health for health? Since then, no other pharmacist has been involved. I feel lonely. I want to be able to say that a few of us have been in that particular position. Because when you are there, you become an influencer, and you do have the opportunity to strengthen many things. You will find that a whole lot of people they're activists, they're making a lot of speeches at a lower level. There's a tendency to just listen to them and do nothing because they can't do much after they made their speeches. So the more we have people, pharmacists especially, to be in health as minister, the better. Of course, there are all these rivalries, all these peddling of influence, and so on. But if the pharmacists strategically put themselves together, it can happen again, and we will have a minister of health. As for the humanitarian outlets, it's the same thing that really influences me. From my mother, I got the idea that it was important. I grew up as a rather delicate young man, but I learned a lot from my mother. My mother always told me, delicate or not, know your rights. Don't let anyone bully you. But please have compassion for your fellow men. And so that's the main driver that I have. How can I help people in my community, people at my level, people who are disadvantaged, a whole array of people that need help. Even some of the wealthiest people on earth need help because nobody is complete in himself. And that's what made me join things like Scouts movement, even student activism. But from that level of student activism that we discussed earlier, a whole lot of things were open to me, including Rotary International. Again, Rotary International, as you know, is a body that is over 100 years old and started 1905, February 23rd, and it's spread all over the world. It has 1.2 million people, and all the figures are there. But you see, interestingly, it got to Africa through South Africa, Johannesburg, in 1921. But it did not come to Nigeria until 40 years later, in 1961. When in 1960, 68, 69, I found that Rotary could do better in this country. Again, from my own trajectory, I knew internationally they could be more significantly respected. What did I find? So I became president of the Rotary Club of Ikeja and so on. But then what was interesting was that you see from president you go into district governor. So there was this conference in Kano where we had to elect a district governor. Somehow I got there was a lot of opposition. I could say it was a photo finish because people thought I was too young at 40 to become a district governor. But I had seen it all by 40. So anyway, I was elected, only to find out that whereas a country like Switzerland would have about, say, 10, 12 districts at that time, the whole of Nigeria wasn't even a district. From Senegal all the way to Cameroon, we were all in one district. Imagine that population, and I felt it was not the best thing. So I said to myself that we must also fight this. So somehow, whereas I was elected to be district governor for West Africa, by the time I became active, I was switched on to be a governor in practice. Nigeria had been made a district on its own, and I know how many visits I made to America. That's how I became the first district governor.
Yeah. Now you have to distinguish in Nigeria of today between giving for self-preservation of self-promotion and giving for humanity. So we have to distinguish between vanity and sublimity in giving.
Yes, you must make that difference. There are extremes. The scriptures say that you must not let your left hand know what your right hand giveth. That's one extreme. The other extremes would have to do with those who give, even as of today, who give, not because they believe in giving, but because it's an opportunity to make some noise about themselves. But it shows those who give genuinely. I know there are some people who probably, or organizations, who probably would have a project of, say, $100,000 and then spend another $100,000 and making noise about it. That's not giving. I would try our best to discourage that. But in Nigeria, really, the situation has become such that in vain do you give advice to those who must do what they want to do. But the Nigerian space will soon change.
Okay. Now, I want to ask you this question, which is very important to me, and that is the question of faith. And it looks like right from childhood, Catholicism has been very dear to you, and the issue of faith has been very dear to you. You were an altar server, you wrote plays for church, you were dancing, they called you a God dancer, and all of that. How has all of this shaped your vision of life and society?
Okay. I believe that nobody travels this world without some kind of other than human level influence. Otherwise, I can't explain it. It's happened to me. Let's settle the issue of this of God dancer. This is the second time you're mentioning it. I said I gained something from my mother, who was very creative. She was good with the arts and the music, and she was a celebrity dancer. Remember, I was the last born for her. Nobody was expecting me to be there. So I was quite close to her, psychologically, biologically, and so on. So when I went to secondary school, it was an opportunity for me to be able to teach others uh, plays, dancing. And so several of the people knew me as a dancer. In fact, I had forgotten about it until about 5 years ago when we had an old boys association. And somebody said, we're happy that Oga Dancer is here today. But so that's what brought this dancing thing. I also took it to the university level where we had plays written and staged. I also go into arts. I do a lot of painting. I used to, I don't now. So, these things are available to me not because I'm special, but because that's how I'm wired. So that's the yoga dancer and arts things. Um, and then you were asking a question about Catholicism. Again, life is what happens to you when you're planning something else. Maybe as a delicate young man, I couldn't go to the farm with the other children, and I had some protection from mom and dad. Uh, but there's this Catholic priest that kept visiting the family, as they used to do in those days. And somehow he must have thought I qualified in his mind to be one of the children to be taken to the mission to live, which is what happened. A few other fellows were there. Again, somehow, I was the one that endured. I was taken away by the age of 5 to the mission. These are very early formative years. I found myself by the age of 6 already fiddling with the typewriter. These are the old typewriters, the choka choka. Now, how did I get into that? This Reverend Father, um, Right Reverend Monsignor Anthony Ogunleye Oguntuyi, really has influenced me in many ways. Um, One way is that by the time I was 6, I was typing documents for him. Later on, I became quite adept at it, and I was typing the contents of his books. He's a renowned historian. He's written the history of the Catholic Church. So I became quite involved in that. But that was only the visible part. I had to go with him everywhere, everywhere. As carrying mass boxes, being a mass server, and witnessing so many of the scriptural events that lead you into becoming a priest. And I had to know all the Latin responses. In those days, it was before, it was anti-ecumenism. So I had to know all the prayers in Latin. And that stuck to me. Even by now, when they say prayers in church, I still feel more comfortable answering back in Latin. And these things affect you. But as for today's church thing, what I could say is that following ecumenism, there has been a proliferation of churches. There has been a proliferation of very many uh, men of God, quote unquote. But several of these men of God, some of them, maybe not several, have become God of men. What do I mean? They have become gods to their parishioners, to the extent that if his spouse wants to take a decision, it is what that pastor says that holds, not what they decide as a couple. The, the man of God turned God of men dominates the psyche of families. That's not what it's all about. I think we need a revision of our approach to our relationship with God. There's too much religiosity in this part of the world and too little spirituality. And I think we really want to make a difference and drive a difference and know which church to depend on. Finally, it is not the religion you're in, but your private relationship with your God that makes all the difference come Judgment Day.
Thank you very much. We have had Prince Julius Adelusi-Adeluyi, a prince, a pioneer, a polyglot, a former minister, this, that, been there, been there. Thank you very much and congratulations again on your 80th year on earth. And I wish you more prosperity and many more years.
I thank you, and I pray that God Almighty would also make you to see 80 and beyond.
Amen.
And may Nigeria prosper as we grow.
Thank you, sir. That was a happy day in 1961 when Muhammadu Sanusi wore the Kano crown. How history repeats itself. He lost the crown and his descendant, another Sanusi, lost his a few months ago. Even with crowns, unhappy days also come. Just before the program ends, this is my poem in honor of Leah Sharibu.
Don't wait, #Leah, till you're too old to enter the fight. You will not have the rudeness to offend the slave master in his gilded tower, so rouse yourself in the madness of your young blood, roar and stain the war path. Please don't die in there and end up like a mummified martyr.
Thank you for watching the program today. You can catch up with my published column on www.samomashaye.com. Also follow me on Twitter. My handle is @SamOmashaye. Until next time, be good.